Guilt. Nobody likes to touch it, yet it's one of the deepest markers of our humanity. It's the conscience crying out, drawing lines in the sand and whispering, "This far and no further." Without it, there is no real integrity, no inner compass strong enough to keep a life from drifting into ruin. But here's the haunting truth. The narcissist doesn't wrestle with guilt the way most people do. The narcissist shoves it down, locks it away, buries it beneath layers of denial. Yet guilt doesn't vanish. It doesn't dissolve in the dark. It retreats into the hidden chambers of a soul, only to return dressed in shadows, distorted, twisted, unrecognizable. No human being, not even the narcissist, escapes the weight of their moral failures. At first glance, it's tempting to think the narcissist feels nothing at all. The indifference looks convincing. The lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting, they carry it all with a cold mask of superiority. But that icy exterior is no fortress of strength. It's a barricade, built not out of courage but out of fear. Fear of facing the one thing that could unravel their whole identity, the truth of what they've done. You see, when someone builds their entire self-image on the illusion of never being wrong, guilt becomes more than uncomfortable, it becomes a mortal threat. That's why the narcissist will stretch themselves to incredible lengths to avoid it. They rewrite the past. They push blame onto others. They surround themselves with voices that echo their lies. But all of this frantic effort does nothing but delay the inevitable. Because the mind, so carefully designed for coherence, can't endure constant contradiction. When cruelty stands beside claims of greatness, when dishonesty masks itself as truth, fractures appear. And in those fractures, guilt festers. It doesn't look like remorse. It shows up as sleepless nights, bursts of rage, gnawing anxiety, endless dissatisfaction. The shadow grows heavier. Psychologists speak of the shadow, the part of us we deny, the corner of the self we exile. For the narcissist, guilt is chained in that place. Yet the longer it stays buried, the more violent its return. It slips out in panic attacks, in compulsive obsessions, in restless striving that never satisfies. The brain itself begins to rebel, demanding alignment between who they claim to be and what they've actually done. And here's the turning point. The cycle intensifies when the supply runs dry. When you stop feeding their narrative, when you withdraw your empathy, when you refuse to keep propping up the mask, they're left alone with silence. And silence is the one arena the narcissist dreads. Because in that quiet, guilt has a chance to speak. At first it's faint, a subtle unrest. But it grows. It echoes. It begins to thunder in the stillness. The narcissist may never stand and confess. Words of apology may never leave their lips. But watch closely. You'll see it in the cracks, erratic outbursts, desperate attempts to control a story no one believes, wild accusations that sound hollow even as they shout them. That's guilt clawing at the walls. Not gone. Not dead. Alive, corrosive and unrelenting. And here lies the paradox. The harder the narcissist fights to deny guilt, the clearer its presence becomes. The more frantic the performance, the more obvious the torment beneath it all. So don't mistake the absence of words for the absence of pain. Don't assume their silence is peace. The narcissist is trapped in a loop of their own making. They built their life on lies, and now the weight of those very lies is pressing down, day by day, moment by moment, slowly but without mercy. When you stop feeding the machine, something extraordinary happens. The manipulations that once tangled your heart begin to collapse under their own weight. Not because you shouted louder, not because you out-argued the deception, but because you chose silence. And silence, when held with strength, becomes a force all its own. The narcissist lives on reaction. They toss out a jab, waiting for the spark in your eyes. They twist your outrage into proof that you're unstable, your tears into evidence you're weak. Every flare of emotion becomes fuel for their story. That's the loop they depend on. But when you don't take the bait, When you stand steady, unshaken, you break the circuit. The current stops. The mirror goes dark. And in that stillness, the narcissist is confronted with something they can't escape. Themselves. No more projection. No more canvas to smear their colors across. Just the raw echo of their own words. The silence you hold doesn't feel like emptiness, it's a declaration. It says without sound, I will not reflect your distortion anymore. At first, the narcissist will thrash against it. Gaslighting texts, desperate threats, hollow apologies, all attempts to reignite the fire. But each one falls into the quiet void and nothing comes back. That's when the unraveling begins. Conversations replay in their mind, the cutting words they once tossed so carelessly now return to haunt them. For the first time, guilt stirs beneath the surface they've fought so hard to protect. See, silence isn't weakness. It's the clearest mirror you could ever hold up. And in that reflection, the narcissist sees not your tears or your anger, but the barren gap between who they pretend to be and who they really are. That gap terrifies them, because their entire identity is built on reaction, on using others as scaffolding for a false self. Remove the scaffolding, and the facade trembles. Reflection doesn't always arrive as a calm, conscious act. Sometimes it crashes in when the distractions fade. The mind, stripped of noise, turns inward. And for the narcissist, those inward questions cut deep. Why did I do that? What am I hiding from? Who am I without control? Each question is a landmine, exploding the lies they've leaned on. But here's the tragedy. Instead of standing in the mirror, most narcissists recoil. They attack the silence. They rage against the mirror itself. Because to accept what they see would mean dismantling the empire of illusions they've built. And that, to them, feels like death. Yet still, the silence speaks. It keeps echoing. It keeps pressing in. And the longer they resist, the louder that inner unrest grows. Silence, steady and unbroken, carries a power far greater than words. Your absence lingers, not as emptiness but as presence, unyielding, unwavering. And every time the narcissist reaches for the old cycle, searching for the spark of reaction, they find only quiet resolve. That kind of silence doesn't point fingers, doesn't defend, doesn't accuse. It simply is. And in its stillness, it shines the brightest mirror of all. When you withdraw, the narcissist faces something they've spent a lifetime running from, themselves. Without your energy to fuel their drama, without your validation to prop up their story, the illusions they've constructed begin to shake. Those illusions weren't only for others, they were for themselves. They had to believe they were always the hero, the victim, or the misunderstood genius. Anything that shielded them from the crushing weight of accountability. But reality doesn't bargain. When your voice is no longer part of their narrative, the story they've told for years starts to unravel. The absence of your validation doesn't just bruise their pride, it rattles the very foundation of their identity. That's why detachment is so disorienting for the narcissist. They've rehearsed the lie so many times that they've come to believe it. But the human soul, no matter how fractured, is still tethered to truth. And when facts start pressing in against delusion, something inside begins to crack. Here's the beauty of your healing. Every step you take toward peace, every ounce of joy you reclaim, every time you rise above the chaos, they all serve as living proof that their narrative was never real. You don't need to argue. You don't need to expose. Your very existence becomes the contradiction they can't explain away. And over time, that quiet contradiction presses harder than any confrontation ever could. The cracks widen. Their coherence falters. Confidence slips. Behavior grows erratic. To the outside world, the performance may go on. They'll still play the part, still try to convince enablers and acquaintances they're unshaken. But every show requires energy, and the more they pour into the performance, the more depleted they become within. The signs creep in: burned bridges, reckless decisions, isolation, paranoia. These aren't punishments. They're consequences. The unavoidable price of a life built on denying truth. And here's where your strength shines brightest. It's not in shouting them down. It's not in trying to prove them wrong. It's in stepping back, living free, building a life they can't touch. That life, anchored in peace and resilience, becomes the clearest evidence of all. Without a single accusation, without a single word, you show what their lies have cost them. You reveal the emptiness of their illusion simply by refusing to participate. That's the paradox. By walking away, by refusing to feed the story, you do more than protect your own soul. You hold up the one mirror they can't escape. And in time, that mirror tells the truth with a voice louder than any argument. The cost of deception is always collapse. Calm has a power the world underestimates. Not the kind that comes from ignoring pain or pretending it never happened, but the kind that rises after the storm, when you face the wreckage and rebuilt your soul brick by brick. That kind of calm is unshakable. And to the narcissist, it's unbearable. For so long, your emotions were the current that kept their control alive. Your anger, your apologies, your tears, all of it was proof that they mattered, that their words and actions still held weight. To them, every reaction was fuel, every spark of emotion a reminder that they weren't invisible. But when you reach the place where your nervous system no longer trembles at their presence, when your face doesn't change at their provocation, something inside them begins to collapse. It isn't just a loss of control they're facing, it's a loss of identity. The narcissist doesn't just crave your reaction, they depend on it. It tells them they're still significant. Strip that away, and what's left is the very thing they fear most: irrelevance. And your stillness, your steady composure, speaks louder than rage ever could. It says, I've moved beyond the game. I don't need to play anymore. To the narcissist, that's not neutrality. That's judgment. That's a verdict. And the fragile ego, already built on shaky ground, reels under its weight. That's when the escalation comes. They'll throw out bigger provocations, hoping for even the smallest crack in your armor. They'll cry, they'll plead, they'll play the victim, all in an attempt to reset the old dance where guilt could be twisted and empathy weaponized. If that fails, they'll change the script entirely. Slander, smears, lies whispered in the ears of others. Not because it's truth, but because disruption is the only control left to grasp. But here's the deeper beauty of it all. Your calm is not cold detachment. It isn't suppression. It's transformation. It's the product of pain refined into wisdom. You've traced the patterns, seen through the illusions, and chosen freedom. That stillness you carry is not a mask, it's clarity. It's what the Stoics called ataraxia, a serene steadiness born not from avoiding adversity, but mastering it. You no longer chase closure. You no longer seek revenge. You no longer hand over your peace in exchange for their drama. And that posture, quiet, steady, resolved, becomes the loudest statement you'll ever make. In your silence, the narcissist hears the one truth they can't bear. They've lost not only the argument, but the audience. That's the wound they can't stitch. Accusations they can fight, anger they can deflect. But to be forgotten, to be rendered insignificant, that's the one outcome they were never prepared to face. And in that, your calm is not just peace. It's power,